This week, we start the show with a technical segment about working with Nmap, Vulners, and Flan Scan. In the security news, lightning cables that steal passwords, malicious code in your VRAM, creating a TJ Hooper for InfoSec, Linux 5.14 unhackable Wii has been hacked, hackers versus dictators, and more. Finally, we have a pre-recorded interview with Benjamin Musler, the senior security researcher at Acunetics, who joined to discuss iframe security. All that and more in this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys.
Top of his game, it's like he hasn't showered for a week. The one, the only, Paul Asadori.
Hey, welcome everyone to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 709, recorded on September 2nd, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Lee, we missed the top of your introduction to me. Like the first 3-4 words, maybe, got cut off.
Big two.
It was a premature introduction. It's all right, though. I got the gist of it. It's all good. You want to go again? Read it again. Did you type it out? Read it again.
Read it again.
All right. And now, a man who's so at the top of his game, it's like he hasn't showered for a week. The one, the only, Paul Asadorian.
Hey, thanks, Lee. It's good to be here. Thanks for joining us. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us as well. Jeff, welcome.
I am looking crispy and sounding crispy because I finally have high-tech audio-visual equipment.
That's right. You've got a new microphone. It's very prominent right on your camera, too.
It is. Until I figure out what to do with it, it's going to stay right in front of me.
There you go. Well, it sounds beautiful.
Thank you, Security Weekly Productions.
You're welcome. Tyler was supposed to be joining. I don't know what happened. Everyone got busy tonight.
He probably got hurt somehow. He's probably in an emergency room. No,
Let's
Tyler.
hope not. Let's hope not. But I do have some announcements for you. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. Subscribe to your favorite podcast via your favorite podcast catcher on your favorite podcast or your favorite YouTube channel. You can sign up for your favorite mailing list and join your favorite Discord server, because Security Weekly should be your favorites of all of those. We're live streaming on Twitch and YouTube as well. You can find information about all of our shows and how to subscribe at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Alrighty. This is now a technical segment on Nmap and Flan Scan. And what's interesting, I covered Cloudflare's Flan Scan on a previous technical segment some time ago. So I wanted to give you a little update on that and show you some examples of what I've been working on to create. It's something similar and I think pretty interesting. So as our listeners know, Flan Scan builds a Docker container with Nmap and the Vulners script. So Vulners scripts are, and I've dug a little more into it, they are NSE scripts, so plugins for the Nmap scanning engine that are written in Lua that look at the Nmap output and then do some matching against vulnerabilities. So if it's open on SSH and there's an SSH banner there that Nmap has reported on, it will go and try and match all of known vulnerabilities with it. If you're thinking that could lead to false positives, you would be correct in your assumption, and I'll talk more about that in an upcoming webinar. So back to Flan Scan, it was released some time ago by Cloudflare, and when I looked at their container, so it's a Docker container-based thing, it does not build Nmap from source code. It actually pulls that from the Alpine Docker build, base build, does not compile it from source code. However, it does include some Python scripts that basically take the Nmap XML output and report and build HTML reports based on that. It even has things that you can post them to AWS. Like I said, the project hasn't been very well maintained, not a whole lot of updates. For example, there's a Docker issue that I'll show you how to get around, and there is a pull request for this project that allows CSV exporting. I've not merged that pull request yet, but I think that's an interesting feature. So just to update you on how you get Flan Scan running, because it is still, I still include that as a tool in my arsenal, because it's still a really fast and easy way to convert XML to HTML output all in a container. So you basically clone the repository, go into the directory, and start editing the make file. And what I found was in one of the updates, they are dropping all the capabilities and then adding one back. So Linux capabilities are essentially permissions for running processes that can grant said processes or revoke process permission based on Linux capabilities. They're very well documented. I've talked about them in the past. When you run a Docker container, you can grant that Docker container Linux capabilities or not. The Linux container on Docker comes pre-configured with a set of capabilities that are on by default. These capabilities essentially give a non-root user the ability that only abilities that root would normally be able to do. So in Nmap's case, it needs the raw socket access to be able to craft packets. Normally you have to be root to do that. However, conceptually, if you drop all the capabilities for the Nmap container in this case, and you grant it the net raw capabilities, ideally it should be able to run without root. However, on my Ubuntu 2004 systems, it does not do that, and you get error messages. There are, I think I did at some point look at what other capabilities it needs, because I think it was the ability to write files or read files in the directory. I think it was writing of files that it needed to do. So there were some wonky things with that. So really all I did to fix this issue in this case is I just removed the dropping of those capabilities. And so it runs with the default level of capabilities that comes with whatever Docker version that you're using on a Linux system. I called that good enough. I mean, it's slightly less secure. I mean, you can go crazy granting and revoking Linux capabilities. In the end, this was something I was just running as a tool in my workstation, so I wasn't too concerned about this. If you were then to go deploy this container in production or on servers that are internet facing or something like that, I do recommend that you create a better profile for it to run. Of course, keeping in mind that Nmap requires certain capabilities that are normally reserved for the root user. So I basically added this makefile, created my own little line called my HTML so I could make build to build the project first. And then I edit my IP addresses. So make build builds the container. When you actually go to run it, you're going to do make my HTML, which simply runs that Docker command that's above. You're going to also, before you actually run it, you're going to edit the shared directory ips.txt, enter your targets and or subnets that you want to scan. Then type make my HTML, which basically runs this Docker command. Can I highlight this? Yeah, that Docker command right there. So when you do that and your scan is finished running, you will get XML files in this directory. And you can see these are the raw Nmap files. Actually, can't go to the second page for some reason. Hold on. Let me just switch that out. Let me see. Can I go back to this now and scroll? Yes, I can. So you can see the XML results are there. If you want to view the HTML, it puts it in that directory in shared reports, and then report underscore and the timestamp. Now, Flanscan is still useful. Obviously, they should probably merge in that pull request. I reviewed it. It looks fine to me, but who am I to judge? Not my project. They should probably merge that in because I think, obviously much of security is accomplished today in Microsoft Excel. So it'd be nice to have this output in a CSV file. But I did notice that it installs whatever version of Nmap comes with Alpine 3.9. Alpine is the small Linux distribution commonly used in containers. And recently at this year's DEF CON, Fyodor Gordon Lyons announced that there'd be a new release of Nmap, which is 7.9.2 is the latest version. So I wanted to create a small container that I could always be running the latest version of Nmap. I don't want to have to rely on the various Linux distributions to get around compiling Nmap and then putting it in the distribution. In fact, I can show you which version comes with a fully updated Ubuntu 20.04 system. It's not 7.92. I think it's 7.80 that it comes with. So you're several versions behind on the engine. I haven't done any scientific testing. It feels faster when I run the latest version of Nmap. I don't know if that's just, a weird brain artifact that is telling me that, my brain's telling me it's faster because I think it should be faster. So I wanted to create a small container that basically when I ran Nmap on my system, it could always be the latest version without a whole bunch of trouble, without me just like compiling it by, downloading the source, compiling it by hand, and then putting it in the path and making sure that was in my path. I wanted something easier. I also wanted a container that was pulling down the latest Vulners scripts as well. So I created a Docker file. Now, in this one, I used Ubuntu 20.04, and I will say, you can poke fun at me if you want, but I want one Linux distribution. It may not be the best Linux distribution in your mind. It may not be the fanciest, whatever. We could talk about the differences in Linux distributions till the cows came home. My point was I wanted to settle on one. And since I'm running Ubuntu 20.04 on all of my systems, and then I started running it on all my servers, I said, you know what? I'm just going to standardize on Ubuntu because I know where the bodies are buried, right? I know where all the little quirks are. If I commit something to memory, such as how to, configure a static IP address or modify the host name or whatever, if that's different in a different Linux distribution, I'm really just slowing myself down, accomplishing the same task just in a different way, because that other Linux distribution decided to do it a different way. So I've settled on Ubuntu 20.04, and I think their container builds are really good. So I start in this line right here where it says from Ubuntu 20.04. I start with that as my base image. I tell it to build Nmap version 7.92 in one of my arguments there. And then I install all of the packages and system dependencies. Now, I didn't just magically create this list. I had to build a VM, and I had to compile Nmap, and I had to install all of the dependencies in the VM and take notes as I did that so that I could automate this in a container build. So these are what's needed. I always update CA certificates as well when I do. So I install the CA certificates package from Ubuntu, and then I make sure that I update them, making sure I have the latest certificate chain. Otherwise, if you use curl to pull down something from a site that's using SSL, you might get errors. Thank you, John Kinsella, for that tip. Help me with that. Then you're going to, in one gigantic command, you're going to download, compile, and install Nmap, and download and install the Vulners NSE scripts from their site. So actually, I download the version of Nmap that you specified in the variable. Then you unpack it. Then you build it. And I built it specifically. I spent some time going through the configuration options. I really just wanted Nmap. I wanted a small, fast, light container with just Nmap. I don't want ZenMap, Nmap update. I don't need, because I'm doing it in a container, NDiff, nping, and ncat. Like, I don't want to build all those. Just so I say without those, and it won't build all those. And I had to do some gymnastics to get all the paths correct and things like that. Then make install, and then clone the Vulners scripts, which are just NSE scripts that enumerate vulnerabilities. Then, of course, my entry point is Nmap, so when I run the container, it'll run Nmap. So then you build the container, Docker build. T is tag, I believe. So you call it, name the container Nmap in the current directory. Once that's done building, it takes, your mileage is going to vary depending on how fast your system is. It can take a few minutes to build. It's not that bad because I'm not building all the other utilities that come with Nmap. Then you run it with this Docker command right here, which is a really long command to type, and I'll show you how to get around that. So you're going to Docker run it. You're going to remove the container when it's done. You're going to run it in interactive mode with a TTY. I believe is what the T does to Docker. Listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, going off of memory there. And then you're going to run your Nmap is the name of the container, but since my entry point is Nmap, it's the same thing as running Nmap, as I just put my options right after it. And so I run it against the host, and I see the results here. So you can see it runs Nmap with lowercase s, capital V, which tries to determine what service is service fingerprinting, essentially. It determines what service is running on that particular port. It determined it was this particular service. And it was running, and here's where the false positives come in. And I have more information on this in the upcoming webcast. I believe it looks at OpenSSH 7.9 P1 and says, well, OpenSSH 7.9 P1 is vulnerable. But if you look after this, it's actually Raspberry Pi. There's this extra information, deb10u2. That can be indicative that the distribution, Ubuntu, Debian, Raspbian, whatever, has backported the security fixes into OpenSSH 7.9 P1 and given it their own version designation. And what will happen with not so advanced vulnerability scanners is it'll say, hey, OpenBSD, OpenSSH 7.9 P1 is vulnerable to CVE 2001-0554, which obviously this is a fully patched Raspberry Pi and is not vulnerable to a CVE from 2001. So in that sense, it's a little disappointing, but hey, it's free.
Oof.
Right? Finds lots of vulnerabilities there. Yeah. And it also tells me that my bind server is out of date, which it's not. Again, for the same reason, right?
So 10U5, I suspect it's pretty damn current.
Yes. So also, you can save the results to a directory. You basically map a local volume. So your present working directory /results gets mapped to a directory called /results inside the container. Now I didn't make a note of what uppercase Z means. It's something to do with the volume permissions in Docker, and I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what that is, but you can probably look that up. It doesn't. I don't believe it worked very well without that. It'll actually create the directory in your present working directory called results, so that doesn't need to exist. And I should know what the capital Z meant, and I forgot. I'm sorry. So then I run the command again, except I do lowercase o, capital A, which tells me to output all of the output formats in Nmap. So Nmap format, greppable format, and XML format into /results. So when I run that, I actually get the results in my present working directory /results. And I can review the results there. So basically running Nmap in a container, saving those results to a shared volume. The correct terminology is a shared local volume. Shared local volume. Yes. So now what I want to do is I want to create an alias that runs the containerized version of Nmap rather than the version of Nmap that's included in Ubuntu 20.04. So you can see if I just run Nmap from the command line with -- version, it tells me, hey, you're running Nmap version 7.80. I'm like, wow, that's kind of old. I really want to run the latest version of Nmap. So I run the alias command, and I alias the Nmap command with the command docker run -- -rm-v. In this instance, due to the way the alias command works and the bash shell works, I had to do $, open parenthesis, pwd, close parenthesis, which runs the pwd command and inserts the results of the pwd command into this command when you run it. So I do the alias, and once I alias it, which has been a feature in Unix systems for like a really, really long time, probably since Lee and Jeff remember. And when I run Nmap again, I get the latest version, 7.92, which is awesome. So now I can run Nmap on my system, and it'll just run, provided I keep this container image called Nmap on my system, it will run that and use the latest version of Nmap, which saves me the trouble of having to compile it every time. But what happens if Fyodor releases a new version of Nmap? You might be asking. And if you are, I'll give you the answer to that. So all you need to do is refresh it. So to do that, you remove the image called Nmap. With docker space RMI Nmap :latest, we'll remove the Docker image called Nmap or the associated Docker image. And then you just need to rebuild it. Docker build -t Nmap, and then the location of your Docker file that I provided to you in this technical segment. We'll go ahead and rebuild it and rebuild you a fresh and clean and updated Nmap Docker container, which also has the Vulner scripts that are also updated in that as well. So you could run this whenever you want to do an Nmap scan with Vulners, and not only would you get the latest version of Nmap, you'd also get all the latest NSE scripts in XML format, or whatever format you're outputting. You're not going to get pretty HTML unless you use Flan Scan. So this was all in conjunction with the work being done for our labs review of vulnerability management, vulnerability scanners, which is being published very, very soon. So some of the things that we tested. Questions?
Awesome.
Comments?
So
Can you show us like what some of the output looks like?
I did on the other one. I have, if you can cut away from my screen for a moment. I have output somewhere. It sorts, hold on. It's probably best if I just show you a slide. It sorts it by vulnerability by host. Right? So it says SSH vulnerability. Oh, no, I'm not logged in. I don't have. Do I have results handy? Oh wait, I might. Hold on.
Didn't mean to trip you up. I'm sorry.
Hold on. I might have Flan on here. Hold on. Let me see if I do. I might have some results on here. Everyone's going to see my vulnerability results are going to be hanging out on the internet now.
Oops.
Let's see if this command works. All right, yeah, you can come back to my screen.
Yay.
So these are what the results look like.
Pretty.
It's good. It's a good question, Jeff, actually. Yeah. So you can see this is a scan from a while ago that I just pulled up. And it says OpenSSH 7.5, and it lists all of the vulnerabilities with that particular service, and then it lists the hosts that are associated. So the above 42 vulnerabilities apply to this network location, which it might need. I mean, at that time, I needed to update my firewall, or not again because it's just doing the pattern matching. Back to that explanation. So that's what the results look like. They're not bad. Pretty nice HTML format. I think when you click on these, what happens? Nothing. Apparently.
Hey, a question on the Discord, and I can't answer it. Did you mention where you're getting all the vulnerability lists?
Yes. I'm getting those from the and this command right here. When you clone that GitHub repository, that is the Vulners NSE scripts, which contain the all the vulnerability checks, and you're just copying them into opshare nmap scripts vulners.
Cool.
And then I'm actually updating all the other scripts for nmap as well. Updating the database of NSE scripts. There's whole bunches of NSE scripts do all kinds of stuff. Some of which actually will discover vulnerabilities outside of Vulners, right? But that GitHub repo is what holds all those vulnerability checks. I like it for small, quick, fast scans. Maybe I'm on a pen test. Maybe I've just stood up a system or two and I just want to scan them quick, see what it's running, see if there might be any vulnerabilities associated with it. That tends to be how I use it, which is why I like having that container that I can just build and always get the latest updates.
Right.
So I'm assuming that Nmap is still more or less a free product?
Nmap is free and open source, correct? Mm-hmm. The Vulner scripts are open source, but Vulners also has a suite of commercial products as well that lets you at least scan Linux systems. I don't think they let you apply patches, but they have like a vulnerability management system for Linux systems, I believe, which I did not test. I looked into it, but I didn't test it or write it up or anything.
So for the small, poorly funded organization company that doesn't really have much security,
they should use OpenVAS
maturity.
Yes,
which means they probably don't have a lot of technical skills.
No, I wanted to run a correction on the OpenVAS. So you can download a pre-configured virtual machine that runs the free and open source version of OpenVAS, in addition to, get my terminology right, the Greenbone community feed, which is a free feed of plugins. It is not the same feed. It's missing some plugins and other features that they document on Greenbone's website. I believe it is called the Greenbone Professional. I want to say professional feed, but I don't think it is. I'm thinking of Nessus. There is a Greenbone commercial feed, which that actually may be what it's called, that you can get a 14-day trial of if you register. Last week, or week before, whatever, I said that you had to register for the VM. It's not the case. I talked to the folks at Greenbone, who are very, very nice, by the way. And I told them I'd run the correction. So you can register and get the Greenbone commercial feed, I think is what they call it, with all the like enterprise checks and all that kind of stuff. Although it did find vulnerabilities in some of my Cisco devices in the open feed, which is I was using. So Jeff, to answer your question more succinctly, if you're a small shop, you're looking for a vulnerability scanner, I'd go download one of the VMs from OpenVAS, and I'd start with just the community feed and do some scanning. It's actually got some really, I talk about it in my review that's going to be published, and I'll talk more about it in the upcoming webcast. But like, I like the features in it. You can schedule scans, you can recast risk. I'll show you how to do that. You can see reports of all the vulnerabilities, export the reports. Like, it's really nice. I like it.
So it looks like what we got though is if you want to use Nmap with the Vulners vulnerability scan and actually have output you can really read, you use Flan to reformat it.
Correct.
It's maybe not the most sophisticated scanner because of false positive, but it at least make it much more readable than it was before. Yeah,
like I probably should now port this into like my cloud environment where I'm running some services. And there shouldn't be that many listening ports on my cloud, services and many of my EC2 instances, which I think is how, if I remember reading correctly from Cloudflare, which is how they run it, right? You stand up a bunch of servers in the cloud, they're internet facing, you've hardened them, they're running in AWS, for example. There shouldn't be that many running services on those systems and or containers. And so like that's where I would run, Nmap every single day and have it output a report to an S3 share that I check. At least that's how I do it. Running it on your internal network when you've got IoT devices and all that other stuff, I would use Jeff, back to your question, for smaller shops, I'd use Rumble to discover everything that's on my network, and I would use OpenVAS to scan it for vulnerabilities and work off of that. And Rumble has a free license that is limited by number of IP addresses. I forget how many it's limited to, but you can create a free Rumble account. That's HD Moore's company. They do the best job. I mean, obviously that's what we do, is we test stuff, and Rumble accurately identifies devices like no other. It is the benchmark standard for that, in our opinion.
Cool. Thank you.
I just had this vision of you automating as you're building containers and deploy them. As part of that, you'd execute the Vulner scan against the new container before you pushed it live. but that might not be the best answer. But it sounded like it could be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's how they're using it because, it's small, fast, light, and I can just constantly run it against my build environment, my production environment, and grab those results and just see like, hey, wait, there's a new service here. Should that be there or not? And is it vulnerable?
So you're not going to DOS yourself.
Right.
Are you going to wind up incurring costs in the cloud for extra cycles to respond to or is it going to be negligible?
No, it should be pretty negligible in my opinion. It does not take up many. I mean, I used it for internal scanning, and it takes some time, but not. I didn't actually look at the. We try not to get hung up on like performance benchmarking when we're doing these labs tests, right? It's more about how is the user experience, right? So like if a scan takes a really long time, we might make a note, but we're not looking at doing performance benchmark testing like you would see for CPUs and applications and things like that. I think it's a different kind of testing.
I was thinking you were focusing on the user experience and the usability and accuracy more than anything else.
Yeah, like how and why you would use it more so than does this scanner run faster than the other one, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Again, I do have a webcast with. The webcast will also include a open source project called Vuls.io, VULS.io, which is a credentialed only vulnerability scanner for Linux or BSD based systems. So it logs in, gets a list of all the packages and running versions, and then double checks that and cross references it with ExploitDB, NVD, and a whole bunch of other ones. So that won't be covered in the webcast. I'll show you how to set that up. Some of the more challenging things are if you're just looking to set something up quick, or your Linux skills vary, in a particular area, like maybe you've never run a project that uses Golang or something like that. The good news is, not Larry probably too, but Adrian and I've spent a lot of time getting a lot of the open source stuff working, and so we can save you a lot of headache. So I've got examples of that in the webinar. I've been trying to share that in the technical segments as well, because getting these things running it can be kind of tedious if that's not like your one of your primary functions in life, which for labs it happens to be for us.
I was looking at your run script you created. I remember in some cases you've talked about changing the default versus letting things, changing it to some directory under op versus letting it just throw it where it wants to.
Yeah.
When do you go which way?
It's interesting. I mean, because this is in a container, I probably could have put it wherever the defaults were because it is in a container. I think that was a carryover probably from my previous notes where I was building Nmap on my local system and I didn't want it to get confused or step on anything else on my system. And so I put it in /opt, right?
Right.
You can have control over all that stuff. Nmap, I think, actually gives you control over all that stuff.
I like the idea of just, keep from stepping on whatever might be built in, putting it in a different place. That's but then you have to learn to call it out of the different place, or you're going to get confused.
Right, and then also like if I happen to install the same package from the distribution, I'm not stepping on what I built either.
Right.
If I forget that I built it, or if you manage multiple Linux systems and you enter the wrong command into the wrong system, which can be really, really bad. But we've all done it at least once. Why is the primary mail server for the university rebooting, Paul? I don't know. I was just rebooting that other. Oh, wait. I was in the wrong SSH window. Sorry about that. Mail should be back in a couple minutes.
Ruh-roh.
Been there. True story. Only about 18,000 people without mail. Oops. Live and learn. But yeah, so if I do that like on and oftentimes I'm like on my laptop SSH into one of my desktops, and I'm trying to do stuff, and I'm like apt install Nmap. It won't step on the version that I built. So, or it gets installed as a dependency for something else. More likely than me making. Well, maybe not more likely than me making a mistake, but also another use case. Alrighty. Any other questions?
I'm good. Very impressed. Well, very impressed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was fun. It was one of those things like, I've been meaning to do this for a long time to make things easier on myself, and finally I had the opportunity to do it as part of another project, which is usually how things get done, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, with that, we will take a short break, come back with the security news for this week. Stick around.